Okay. Getting continued help. So this is our last talk at you session, where we are going to now have several people that we have asked to come here whose job it is to help tribes do this work. So they are somehow a resource to support tribes, and they're from all parts of the country and different organizations. And they're going to give you a little preview on the kinds of assistance you might be able to get when you walk out of the virtual door today, so that you don't feel so alone, so overwhelmed. And so you've already heard from some of these folks, but we're going to bring back Ben Hatchett from the Western Regional Climate Center. He not only does a lot of really great work, research in his own data science, but he is around to provide support. Althea Walker, she can tell you a little bit about what the Climate Adaptation Science Centers do, because she used to be one of their tribal liaisons, and can also talk about what the Climate Science Alliance does. Nicky Cooley, you guys all know ITEP, and so she can talk more about what ITEP can do to support and provide help. And Melinda Chase, she is with the Alaska Climate Adaptation Science Center, so she can also tell us how the Climate Adaptation Science Centers can provide support. And then I'm going to share with you a directory that we have developed that can point you in the direction of a lot of contacts around the country that can help. So I'm going to actually go, Ben, you're first. So go ahead. We're going to hand it off to you to talk a little bit about what, from your vantage point, where can tribes go for continued help?
Yeah, so there's a lot of places, and I think like we've talked a bit about finding places or people at those places who you get along well with, you build a relationship with, and you kind of, through that relationship building, folks can help you more, they can understand your problems better. And that's one thing we try to do at the Western Regional Climate Center is as a provider of climate services. It's basically essentially our job to really listen and see what people need, what are the questions that you have, what are the challenges that you have, what kind of data do you have that could be augmented with other data. But knowing really what the questions and problems that you have are is really helpful for us to be able to point you in the directions of, oh, have you thought about this type of data set, or have you ever seen this tool, or this is a new tool that just came out. Like I think Lori mentioned, the state climate trackers are a really neat, handy tool that the Western Regional Climate Center has been developing. But it's hard because there's so many tools. Some of them work well, some of them worked well and are no longer updated. And that's where I think, just reaching out to the different groups that are tasked with providing these kinds of services. So the regional climate centers. So like, I know some of you are in the High Plains Regional Climate Center area. There's the Western Regional Climate Center. If you're in other parts of the country, there's different centers there. And so those are all called RISA programs, or Regional Integrated Science Advisory Programs. I can't remember the exact name, but I can find all these places for you to get that kind of information. And so, it's basically our job is to help connect you with either the data, the historical data you need, or in other cases, and I showed one slide earlier today with the work we did in Ventura County. And so that work involved helping a large group of water resource related folks put together a set of climate projections that is kind of a requirement for getting state Department of Water Resources funding. I think it might have been the Proposition 2 funding. But so that can be very helpful if these programs require other things to be even able to be eligible for them. Have you done this, or can you have the capability to do that? And that's something that regional climate centers can work with you to help put that together at different levels. And many of them are willing to go after funding with you to help pay them to do these kinds of things, to help you be more competitive and be able to contribute, kind of the background science and up-to-date research and point you towards some of the things that will check some of these boxes for some of these different funding agencies. And so that's part of our job, is to really be here to answer your questions, point you in the right direction, help give you ideas of other things that are kind of emerging or hot topics in the funding world. Sometimes things might be very important, but aren't exactly what the funders are looking for. And it's good to know that, because there's other ways to kind of work in what you need, but also with what is going to help you secure that funding. And yeah, I think Josh pointed out a ton of really good strategies and techniques in there. And so it's really about, I think, building these collaborations and relationships with the climate centers or other groups that can facilitate getting you the data and information and making your grants. Unfortunately, it is a very competitive world. That would be great to drive that in a different direction, but it's a challenge, and that will take a while. And so we're happy to help try and make your proposals and applications as competitive as can be. Happy to answer questions as well, but I'll stop there and let everyone else go.
Ben, can I ask you one question before we move to our next speaker, which is CNAP? What is it? How does it fit into RISA? What is RISA? And then how does somebody make the first step to contacting, is it you or the right first contact to get access to the help that the RISA program has to offer?
Yeah, so the CNAP, which is the California Nevada Applications Program, is part of this RISA program, which is Regional Integrated Science. I can't remember what the A stands for off the top of my head, but they're essentially a group of researchers that's been put together to try and address numerous problems and basically be available to help kind of act as like a test bed or like a greenhouse almost, you could think of, for building up these ideas and developing them and working with various stakeholders, of which tribes are a really key group of stakeholders that we recognize and know need help, and we want to help. And I think the first step is just going to the RISA page, and I can find some links to add in there if those aren't already there, and just contacting people. And when you contact people, don't hesitate to pester them. If you don't hear from them, people get a ton of email and they're busy and they might have composed a response and just forgotten. So don't be afraid to be annoying. And if you don't hear from someone, that kind of, after you've pestered them, that's move elsewhere, because I think you will be able to find people to work with. But the CNAP group is focused on the California, Nevada area. There's other of these regional places in the Pacific Northwest. There's also the USGS Climate Science and Adaptation Centers, which are kind of a similar program, but funded through the USGS. And a lot of this really overlaps. And so there's a lot of ways you can kind of leverage connections with one if they're busy or don't have time, and they can hopefully point you in the right direction to another expert or helper that can help you out as well.
Well, I think that's a really good segue. Thank you, Ben. A good segue to Althea. Then we might go with Melinda after that to talk about what they're aware of and what they're part of. How can they help? So Althea, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thank you, Angie. So Althea Walker, I am Nez Perce, Hopi, and Gila River. I live out here on Otham and Peaposh lands out in the Phoenix metropolitan area. And I am the co-director and community resilience lead for the Climate Science Alliance, which is based out of San Diego. So I work remotely. But if you haven't heard about the Climate Science Alliance, we're a small but mighty team. Right now we have 8 staff, and we're here for community, primarily working with tribes on climate adaptation, not only in Southern California, but really expanding our reach to other tribes outside of the region, into other states and even nationally. So, and my role primarily, aside from helping with operations, is I'm working closely with our tribal working group. And, talking about resources today, ways to work on, get the work that you need done, finding partners, finding friends. Like we are that organization and strive to be that organization for our partners, especially our tribal partners, in, bringing partners together, bringing community to the forefront, bringing Indigenous stewardship to the forefront, and, really, letting and giving that power to the tribes to lead these projects, and us just being that support system, so that they're getting the work done that's needed in their communities. But the three areas that we focus on are building resilience. So that means supporting regionally specific cross-disciplinary research to better inform climate solutions. We focus on building capacity, so meeting people where they are. Again, thinking back to the tribes, and providing accessible information on climate science, climate adaptation planning, and project management. And then on the building community side, the Climate Science Alliance really playing a key role in bridging that gap between climate research and our tribal communities and other communities that we work with through multiple innovative avenues of science translation. So going back to the tribal working group and being able to convene and bring together, 20 plus tribal nations from the region, there has across the board and over time, 70 plus individuals participate in these monthly meetings. And, we will meet outside of those monthly meetings if needed, but so many projects have come about and from this group because they have this space to share, what's important to them, what are their priorities, providing that grant assistance and getting those grants submitted. But really, I certainly appreciate and the opportunity to work with this tribal working group and this group of tribal environmental cultural professionals to get the projects on the ground and funded, and just being able to be in community with them. It's pretty much just a group of friends. You come together and being able to get stuff done. But that's one of my messages today on resources and looking for things to help you do the work that you need to do is, for me, for the Climate Science Alliance, it's people, it's relationships, it's putting, the human aspect first. And it's not about projects. It's not about finding funding, like all that comes after. It's part of the journey. But really focusing on, building that community and those friendships and relationships, and then you get to work together, you get to work with your friends, and get funding to come together and have a good time. So that's really how we approach our work at the Climate Science Alliance. If you're not already involved with the tribal working group, certainly feel free to reach out to me. Our next meeting is at the July 28th. Sometimes we're virtual, sometimes we're in person. It just depends on what's going on that month. But certainly we're here as a resource to help you, to share ideas, to go to lunch together, whatever it may be. But certainly look to the Climate Science Alliance. And if you're outside of Southern California, like say Dennis up in Montana, I'm looking for those groups or those opportunities to bring people together. So, to ensure that nobody ever feels alone, especially in this work that we do in climate. It can get emotionally exhausting, and you may be the only person in your department or not knowing like how to approach your work. Certainly look for those groups and opportunities to bring people together, so that that you have a support system, or you can be that support system to others. And then, so I can put some links in the chat for our tribal working group. We also have this, especially for our non-tribal partners or anybody wanting to work with tribes. We put together this Building Authentic Collaborations with Tribal Communities guide together, which goes through, educating ourselves on true American history and, I think just all the ins and outs of working with tribes. I'll put that link in there if you're interested in that. And then one last thing, which I've tapped into over the years, especially working for some programs that are limited to staff, is tapping into the youth and finding in those internship opportunities like ITEPs to be a host site, to bring the youth in, to help them, add to your staff capacity, but also to help get the work done. I was working for the Gila River Indian community. Gila River would not have a climate adaptation plan if it wasn't for the youth. From the ITEP provided an intern for us, as well as the AmeriCorps program. But, just I think wanting to plant that seed of maybe you're not able to hire somebody full-time, but looking for those internship opportunities and challenging our youth to help us address the problems that we're facing in our communities. And then in my previous job, I know Melinda's going to touch on this. I was with the Southwest Climate Adaptation Science Center. The CASC network is what we call it. Certainly tap into those centers, and the tribal liaisons are your point of contact. I was the Southwest liaison. The Southwest Climate Adaptation Science Center is currently looking to hire their tribal liaison. So hopefully in the near future, we hear of who that will be and start integrating them into this space with us. But I know Melinda will share more about the casks. So I will stop there, but I'll put these links in the chat. Thank you.
Thanks, Althea. Y'all might be also seeing that I put the link to our directory of all the contacts we know of that are providing technical assistance to tribes. And so the folks you're hearing from today are in there. We're going to keep adding to it. So if you see anybody we missed, let us know. Melinda, you're up, and please tell us all about the Climate Adaptation Science Centers.
All righty, well, Dogaden, that is a grateful thank you for having me today. I'm sorry that I'm not going to have my video on. I have video problems and also display problems, so Shasta is going to be running my slides for me. Thank you very much. Melinda Chase, Ezra, Gitanith Chag, Stan, Fairbanks International Arctic Research Center, Kosanek, and Siyith Hanir Godran. I'm happy to be here today. I'm Melinda Chase. I come from the mouth of the Long River, also known as the Anvik River, which is where my home village of Anvik, that's about 80 people, is at on the confluence of the Anvik and Yukon rivers. I do live and work in Fairbanks, Alaska. I work at the International Arctic Research Center at the Alaska Climate Adaptation Science Center. And I just want to extend a big thank you to the Pala Indian tribe and those of you, including Shasta and your team, for hosting us. We did make it to Pala. It's beautiful country. Definitely, Shasta, I saw where you saw the difference between green and brown, particularly with the drought, the long-standing drought in your area. We partnered with Shasta last year, and she came up to Alaska and worked with us and our tribes. And so, talking about resources, I think what's really evident is the intertribal resources and relationships and the learning that could happen among tribes and across tribes in partnering, whether that's at a regional level or across states. And so I think that's really significant what we can learn from each other. And I think I really want to start off with that, in part because I'll just digress for a really quick story. I took a walk yesterday morning and I came back through the casino here and I saw a display, and the display was on the relocation of one of the tribes here that's part of Pala. And it really, really struck me. I mean, to the point where it was emotional because it talked about the forced relocation, you know, and with our team today is Geraldine Kelly, you know, and her community is looking at potential partial or full relocation. And we have so many communities. We have 144 villages across Alaska that may be looking at relocation at some point, or potentially protect in place or managed retreat. And what does that mean when you have choices around it, or maybe when you don't have choices around it and you have to look for an area that's in your traditional area, and then knowing the history of some of what our tribes have been through in a forced relocation. So it was pretty emotional to think, and they referenced in that story downstairs the Secretary of Interior, and to read that now years later, knowing we have our first, you know, Indigenous Secretary of Interior, and what that means we're in terms of the work that we're doing in this point of history, I think is really something for all of us to reflect on with the agencies we're involved with. You know, the federal government has not always been friendly to our tribes. And as we move forward, you know, how do we build relations across tribes and across agencies? And we're not just resources, as Althea said, right? So with that, I'll move on. So there's a national network, which you've heard referred to as the National Climate Adaptation Science Centers. These were stood up several years ago now, like 12 years ago. I think Alaska was the first one to come online. And then since then, we've added several. This one is actually missing, I believe, another. Oh no, it looks like it's the current one. We have had a new one added out of the Midwest. And actually, I can't remember if this is, I think this is the most recent one. I'm sorry, it was just sent to me this morning. So we have all of these adaptation science centers, which really are a partnership between the USGS and primarily a university partner to really combine research on climate. Several years ago, it was recognized under the Obama administration that, you know, the research needed to complement each other with what USGS was doing and many of the universities around the country, so that they could combine efforts and not duplicate efforts in the area of climate adaptation and climate science. And so we have these, they're new entities. They are affiliated under the Department of Interior, but of course can pull from all of the universities that are partnered, including tribal universities that have partnered as part of the CASCs, and that's the short form of the Climate Adaptation Science Center. They include you know, expertise across the spectrum in terms of some of the top scientists that are doing climate adaptation planning in their region, as well as really provide support for communities, and in particular tribes, which you know, under USGS and the Department of Interior is part of the trust responsibility. So this is just a breakdown of those national centers. So next slide. And I only have 4 slides, so I'm going to move pretty quickly. So the National Climate Adaptation Science Center, I have a link there, but it's, we don't have to go to that one, Shasta. Oh no, yeah, you don't have to go to that one yet. The National Climate Adaptation Science Center does have a main web page, and then of course they list the different science centers around the country, and many of them have, you know, multiple tools, data tools that you can go and visit. Probably some of you have been there already and utilized them. But I guess what I would really, really stress is that because many of the science centers are developing those tools, or the university folks that are affiliated with them, is that definitely if you don't understand a tool or you need to spend more time with it, is go and look at it. Like Geraldine, who's with us, she was part of a project, and of course we ended up looking at a lot of our tools that were available at the Alaska Climate Adaptation Science Center at the Scenarios Network for Arctic Planning. And we gave practice time, just like we did during this session here, right before lunch and during lunch. But if you don't understand it, seek out the scientists that developed it, seek out the staff people that developed it. They are there to help make that understandable. So I just want to stress that, and they're approachable. One of the things I wanted to add, they also have additional resources in many of our research centers or climate science centers. And I want to point out one that references, Shasta, if you can go to the climate reports. I want to point this out because Kyle brought up all the different reports that can be used in seeking funding or seeking resources. And we did this quick guide to climate reports, and maybe you can just, scroll down. It just has a visual, and it talks about, the state, these different reports, like he mentioned, the IPCC report, and when does it come out. It gives a quick little profile of it, who the audience is for, and a little bit about where you can find it and the scope, why it was created. So that's, maybe we can find a link, or you can see that link up there. And Shasta, if you can put that in the chat, that'd be great. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the presentation.
Okay.
So with the Alaska Climate Adaptation Science Center, I just wanted to mention, if you can go to that, Shasta, go to the Climate Science Center. Many of, and you see up there in the tribal network, can you hit that, scroll down and go to the network overview? So of course, many of our tribal, our climate science centers, they have a page for, or web, several pages for their tribes. So make sure you go to the Climate Science Center for specific information for your region for tribes, because they all have resources there. The Northwest is great. I believe the Southwest. We don't have a lot of upcoming events because we sort of do this as a planning time in the summer, because we have so many villages and tribes that are out doing subsistence, that we found out our numbers are low, rightfully so, especially if people are trying to gather and fish and gather. But I wanted to point out the other thing. Can you scroll down more, Shasta? Many of our climate science centers, keep on scrolling. I'm not going to go into this, people can visit this, but we have teams that are evolving, and in particular, like we have a learning network that we've been building out with some of our expertise. And I really want to point out something that's, I think, evident for some of you, but it's really been critical for our team, is to build out and include local leadership. That's what Geraldine brings in, Indigenous local leadership at the village level for us. And so she's part of our overall advising team and work team. We also have somebody who is works on land issues that we can reference, that she's in the BIA system. That's Diane Sam. And then the other folks to really pull on as resources is our Indigenous scholars, our faculty and leadership. And that's what Laverne is bringing into, and she comes from a liberal arts background. She's the Department of Social Work chair. And so she brings in a great deal of information about trauma and trauma-informed care, and has been really integrated into some of our work. So I wanted to just point that out as resources across your institutions to consider. Okay, next slide. And then finally, oops, I'm sorry, back one slide. I want to stress this, but I know that that Althea also stressed it, and I just want to say that, you know, I'm lucky enough to be part of the Tribal Liaison Learning Network under the BIA Tribal Climate Resilience Program, which I think many of you are familiar with. It's been mentioned several times as a funding source, and of course has funded many of our projects. One thing I wanted to share, and I'm not sure if it's out fully, it did come out. It did come out to the liaison networks, and it was a little bit shock to the system, is that Rachel Novak, who's our coordinator at the national level and has been a lead of this project, is resigning at the end of the month. She is going to be focusing on her family, which we all know is significant in having healthy communities. And so that's going to be a transition. And what I want to say is that the liaison network, we have many new people coming online, but we also have seasoned liaisons, or those who formerly worked with us, like Althea, that really have developed an awareness of the resources out there and some of ways to be efficient in this work. So I encourage you to get a hold of them. They're all approachable, and we work well together. So next slide. I'll just go over two slides that have already been mentioned. Ben mentioned the Regional Integrated Science and Assessment, RISA network. It's a mouthful to me. It took me a long time to wrap my mind around them, but they are really similar in the sense that, they have this regional network across the country. They were actually stood up prior to the climate science centers. They're funded by NOAA. And in Alaska, ours is called the Alaska Center for Climate Assessment and Policy, ACAP. It's like a sister organization, and we work really closely with them. They're actually helped to fund our way down here, as well as they fund Laverne and her work with the Climate Science Center. So I would just encourage you to look at some of these centers, because they may have project funding, or they may want to look at partnerships or be able to support you in that data. So get to know folks, again, as Althea mentioned. And then my last slide. And here's just, some of them are definitely recognizing the need to work and support our efforts across our indigenous tribes and communities. And so here, the Alaska Climate Adaptation, ACAP. It's we have all kinds of acronyms. Alaska Center for Climate Assessment and Policy. They've recognized the need to really to be innovative and collaborate with our population in particular, and look at climate justice issues. So I guess I just wanted to touch on them, but Ben has shared quite a bit about them. So I thank you all, and I just encourage you to definitely reach out to folks. Dogaden, thank you.
Thank you, Melinda. That was awesome. I really appreciate the visuals there too, just kind of helping us all understand how these groups kind of work together. True bummer to hear about Rachel, but good for her to go spend some time. So last and not at all least, I want to let Nicky have a few minutes to share too about the kind of support that ITEP can provide, and anything else you want to make sure people are aware of out there that can help them provide or help them get access to continued help.
So first of all, since you all have been sitting for almost over an hour, can you guys go ahead and stretch? And like Dennis was saying, it's time to do the Nicky Cooley stretch. Yes, there you go. Just kind of shake out your arms. I bet you've been doing the mouse, moving the mouse all day, and stand up. Maybe Lori, I think, is moving from side to side. But yeah, don't forget, part of your health is making sure you don't sit in front of the computer, which is hard. Well, it's hard to do. Actually, I was listening to Melinda as I was stretching. So there's a lot of things you can do. So thank you, Dennis. This is the time that I kind of fall asleep myself. I wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning. So, all right. Well, thank you. I think mine will be pretty short. Everybody yesterday and today has already reiterated some great resources to get assistance of how to get continued help. And as Angie keeps saying, you guys should all know about ITEP, but if you don't, I encourage you to look at our website, and I'll be putting in some links about some of the resources. But following Melinda's lead, I'd like to introduce myself in the proper way. Nicky Cooley, Kenya Ani Nishla, look at the na a bashichin, the sana a dashinale, what head lini a dashiche, what our dinner sana Nishla. I am from the Diné Nation. I am of the Town House clan. I'm born for the Reed people. My maternal grandparents are of the Water That Flows Together and people, and then my paternal are of the Many Goats clan. I come from Shanto and Blue Gap, Arizona, and that's how I always introduce myself to you as a Navajo woman. But this has been a great 2 days, so I really appreciate all the resources and the enthusiasm, and I hope no one falls asleep, but it's okay if you do, because I'll come and find you and give you all these resources. And Melinda, yeah, I never fall asleep when I listen to you. I think you just have some really great stuff to say. Let's see, ITEP, we've been around since 2009, and when we started in 2009, all of these resources that have been mentioned, including the adaptation science centers, the liaisons, the health projects, etc., did not exist, or were maybe in the very beginning of existing. And so we started this program with EPA, and then now the cooperative agreement with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So we primarily do a lot of trainings and outreach and whatnot. And yeah, like you said, you should know all about ITEP. So the resources that I would like you to know about, first one is the mind map, and I'm putting the link in the chat box. So we've primarily focused on adaptation planning, but we're moving into mitigation and whatnot. So this mind map, it'll come up with these resources. And Melinda, I don't know if you remember this one. I think Geraldine was there too. This is up in Glen Allen when we met up there for a training, and overlooking the river, and serves as the background to kind of like a one-stop shop. You can click on any of those, and there's a ton of resources, and we're trying to update as much as possible. We're going to get a new website later this month or year. So, but this mind map, we had a couple students that put this together and formulate it. So if you click on any of those, it'll have a list of resources on there. One of those resources that you'll find that was created was the, oh, hold on, that's not the right one. Sorry. Hey, don't open that one. It's got my shopping list on there. So actually,
I'm adding donuts and Cheetos, Nikki.
Please, puffy Cheetos, please. So the adaptation planning toolkit for tribes is on there, and you can download it as a zip drive, or you can click on any of those links and it'll take you to a PDF copy of a checklist, a template for resolution planning, or even a template of how to write an adaptation plan. But one of the best things I think about this is that the last one, it has a list of the tribal climate change assessments and plans that we know about, and they're on there, and they should be updated. Sometimes we try to update it every few months because some links go out of, they're outdated or they change. And so if you see something in there, let me know. There's a couple plans that I need to add. So this adaptation toolkit was really created just for tribes. And many tribes, maybe a few tribes, have used this as part of the process in starting their adaptation planning process. And for a long time, it was literally the only one that actually acknowledged how tribal nations work, or tribal governments, tribal communities. And so there's that one. And if you want to learn a little bit more about what other tribes are doing, you can go to our tribal profile. God, I hope I got it right. Tribal profile list. We just published a one on the native plants nursery, and I put in the link the Paula Tribal Health Climate Project, the Tribal Climate Health Project that Paula is doing. So we write these short profiles and what tribes are doing, what resources that they have, so you can get an idea of what tribes are doing across the country or in your region, and maybe get an idea of how you can maybe replicate or get some assistance from those who have done it before. So there's that one. And our favorite are the fact sheets, right? There's a ton of fact sheets, and we have fact sheets on climate and health. We have EPA fact sheets on there, and from other organizations, agencies. So I really think fact sheets are something that's not, or resources that aren't as spread, or known about. So they're short, and they can give you a good idea of what's going on. And we had a recent one that we did it on COVID and climate change. So that's a fact sheet that we created last year. So look for fact sheets. They're an underutilized resource for sure. And one of my favorite things to talk about, of course, Melinda mentioned it a little bit, the National Climate Assessments. Look for that. It's amazing how many people don't know about the reports that are out there and that specifically mention Indigenous and tribal nations or communities, whether it's international or here in the US. And it's really important because of these reports are getting more and more okay with including Indigenous authors and Indigenous resilience efforts and climate impacts. So Kyle, he probably mentioned, I missed his presentation this morning, is the lead for the Indigenous Peoples chapter. And I'm really, I'm on the, oddly enough, I'm on the Human Health chapter for the upcoming 5th National Climate Assessment. And I can tell you that there's a lot of people out there that don't know about what you guys are doing and how well you guys are doing what you're doing. So if you have any ideas, let me know and I'll try and incorporate that. But I didn't know writing 250 words would be extremely hard, but it's one of the hardest things I've done. And then, so I put here's the 4th one. The 4th one is in there. And then I'm going to talk about the status of tribes and climate change report that ITEP put out in August of 2021. Shasta was the lead author. Thank you. We did a lot of work. I've made probably the only work on the cultural resources chapter, but there's 14 chapters, and it's the whole report specifically was designed to elevate the voices, the efforts, the impacts that tribal nations in the U.S. are facing. And there's 2 chapters I think you might be interested in. Chapter 5 is the health and well-being, and then Chapter 9 is the emergency management. I think I heard that mentioned a few times throughout the 2 days. But there's 2 chapters specifically on water. So there's a lot of folks on this call that did help with that. So there's over 90 of them that helped. So I really appreciate that. Somebody's honking. So we're going to do another iteration and focus it on probably 1 or 2 topics. This was just kind of like broad out there. You can download it for free. We didn't print any of them because it's like 316 pages. But this report will be cited in the upcoming National Climate Assessment, the 5th one, and it's been cited in the IPCC Working Group 2 on Indigenous peoples and whatnot. So we had a hand in helping write that along with Kyle and I think Julie Maldonado and many other folks. So we're really proud of this report, and the next iteration should come out in the next couple of years. See. And the last one is the National Tribal and Indigenous Climate Conference. We are hosting that at the end of August in St. Paul, Minnesota, and we have several trainings that are occurring on the first day of the conference, which are trainings and workshops only, no plenaries, no general sessions. They're longer sessions. Unfortunately, they're all in person. There's maybe like one that might be hybrid. Just we couldn't work around making all of it hybrid. So just those working groups. And I know Jamie Donatuta is going to have one on that indigenizing that BRACE framework that was mentioned earlier. And there's one on emergency preparedness. There's a lot, so there's a lot of, and there's a track on health and well-being too. So this is a big topic. So there's still time to register in person or virtually. So if you want to attend virtually or in person, there's registration is still open. So we hope you can make it. If not this year, maybe in 2024, where we'll have a conference. Again, the next conference. So it happens every other year. So I want to mention that. And in closing, I want to say that, you know, I love learning. I love going to conferences. I don't like putting them on. I love going to conferences and networking, listening to people, or going to community events. And you really learn about what types of issues are out there and what tribes are doing. It's really amazing. It's one of my favorite things to do. And I love to read. I've read almost all those adaptation plans and vulnerability assessments that I mentioned earlier. So really going to conferences, going to trainings, such as the one that, and you know, the summit is one of them. And you'll get an idea of what folks are doing. And that's where I learn. I go to, and whatnot, and listening to the community members, and hopefully they don't talk as fast as Josh did. My head was spinning a little bit. So, but you can probably slow down the recording, huh, Shasta? And so you can, but going to the community and really listening to, you know, people who don't have the title of directors or coordinators or managers or, you know, the researchers and scientists, people in the community, that's who we're trying to work for. So I really encourage you to talk to people that otherwise wouldn't be heard, and whatnot. So, and that's kind of one of the things I learned from Dennis Longknife. He was at he attended my very first ITEP training that I attended. I think that was up in the Shoshone-Bannock territory in Idaho. And I remember, you probably don't remember, Dennis, but you said that, you know, you listen to the people and you'll learn something. So with that, I am going to stop and hand it back over. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Amazing. Man, I don't know how you all must be feeling. If you're brand new to thinking about how you might work on climate vulnerability and adaptation, maybe you walked in here thinking, I'm overwhelmed by the task at hand and I'm not sure where to start. Now you might be feeling overwhelmed by the sheer volume of people trying to help you, and all the places there are to get help. And now where the heck do I start? So I just want to say we appreciate all of our partners, and we try to do our best to just navigate you to all of their wonderful resources, including all the great stuff that ITEP just showed you. And there's some overlap with trying to aggregate and combine these things, and it's all okay because there's a lot of work to do. I think we could, on our side, I just learned some things that I could probably point to over at ITEP even more. So thank you for that. I want to just take a minute here to just go over this directory really quick, because it's one place that pulls together at least these like first points of contact. And all right, so I'm going to share my screen for just a minute. I'm going to take a breather before our final reflection too. If anybody has questions, please be throwing those in the chat. Maybe Shasta, can you be scanning for those?
Yep. And you can also raise your hand if you want to
Yeah.
unmute and actually speak with us.
Yes, speaking is good. I want to show you here just back. Remember we did this yesterday where we talked about the 6 steps, and this is that web page where we're really just trying to make it really easy. 6 steps and any resources we're aware of that can help you get through them. It's all here. So, take some assurance that after you leave here today, you're going to get access to the recording and the slides, and we're going to be pulling together the resources that were shared in the chat. And you have this. So this is like your really miniature version of, all right, I want to get started. I'm going to get through some stuff. Where's my supports? And I'll be adding to this some things we learned over the course of this summit. I want to point to you. So these are the 6 steps, and the directory can be found here. And it's also was linked in the chat, but it's, it's available on this web page. And here's all, there's a lot. Let's see. How many do I have here so far? 55 places to potentially go for help. But if you want to just filter for your region, so say, all right, I'm in the Midwest. Let's see, what fun test to do live. Let's see. Don't like Google Sheets as much as I like Excel, but all right. So I collected more than I needed here. Yeah, I just want Midwest. So here you could say I'm in the Midwest and I want to see whatever is available to me. Well, here's some organizations might be specifically serving the Midwest, or they might be also serving, the entire country. So that's one way that you can use this tools to just look specifically at who's around to help you. It's got, if we know of a specific person to contact, I'm trying to point you directly to them. So what I don't want you to do is have to fumble around through websites trying to look for help and contacting all sorts of wrong doors. I want this to be a place that you feel comfortable finding the right help that you need. And if I missed anything, that's what I'd love to add to it. I'm gonna just take a breather here and ask if there's questions or suggestions. Anybody else that has an organization or person that provides assistance in mind that hasn't been shared yet?
So Nikki had pointed out in the chat that the Climate Science Alliance and ITEP were not in the directory, but I just checked and they're in there. Except that environmental is spelled wrong in Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals. And you know me, if anybody who knows me even just a little bit knows that I zoom in instantly on typos.
I think because the filter was applied, so I'm just gonna create a new filter. All right, so yeah, you're in here. I can fix that.
But even if you have small local groups, we can add those because we want to put those on that regional basis as well. And I wanted to piggyback a little bit on what Althea was saying about the Climate Science Alliance, that yes, we are, and I'm very involved in the Climate Science Alliance. It's my favorite group, and love everybody. And the Tribal Working Group is really meant to be an inspiration for others to do their own tribal working groups wherever, because not everybody is lucky enough / unfortunate enough to live in drought-stricken, hot, on fire, wild Southern California. But and hopefully Althea and Amber won't yell at me for saying this, but reach out to the Alliance to find out, how did they do it? So how can you do it? How can we all work together? And eventually maybe we'll have a nationwide tribal working group, right? Right, Althea? Right, Amber?
That would be cool.
Yes.
Awesome.
Well, you guys, I think that might do it for this session. I want to thank all of our speakers. Thank you so much for sharing your help. Really appreciate it. And should we take an extra 5 minutes, or do we want to start the next session a little bit early?
I say we start early because then we end early, and then I can catch the end of the Padre game because they're playing daytime today.
All right,
priorities.
Shasta, you're the executive decision maker. Tell us when to come back.
Let's see. I would say let's come back at 2:55. We can take 15 for this one. Go Dodgers, Christian, you're fired. Yes, let's take 15 or 14, I guess, and come back at 2:55. And Elaine and Magdalena are going to lead us through our final centering and making ourselves feel good about ourselves. Go Giants. George, knock that off.
Jessica, I have to say that this was the perfect segue into our work. I was so like thinking, how are we going to bring everyone back together? And this is such a powerful group. Everyone is so connected, so passionate, so inspiring. Yeah, I've learned so much in the last 2 days. I just feel so grateful. But I'm just really inspired as we go into our last session. It's just amazing. The community that spans the nation. It's so powerful.